Hey folks, so now you're going to watch part 2 of a seminar that we did at Three Rivers Marine in Woodinville, Washington. I hope you find this information helpful, and make sure that when you're done with this part, you move on to part 3 and the conclusion of our seminar. All right, my primary lures, upper Snohomish River, dicknites, cheaters, and yarn. It's my primary lures. Doesn't mean that's all I'm going to do, all right? I may get out there, I may be pulling some plugs, I might be throwing some spinners, or I may be casting or retrieving some plugs. It depends where I'm at, where are some fish working. Maybe one year some fish have got into some wood and they're messing around in there, and really the only way to attack them is to go after them. So maybe I need to do something else, but I really like the dicknites and the cheaters and yarn. We talked about it already, and I can't emphasize enough, keep your tackle balanced. You guys would be surprised, maybe not, at how much stuff I pull out of the river that people lose, and it's completely oversized. It's like they ought to be surf fishing out on the coast. It's just oversized stuff, right? So keep it balanced within reason of your rod. You want just enough weight to tick across the bottom if you're drift fishing, all right? And that's another area that people seem to struggle with, is they put too much weight on and then they snag up. And we'll talk about that in a second. And you don't want to cast too far upriver from your primary position. So for drift fishing, you get on the hook, you're on anchor, or even if you're standing on the bank and you're drift fishing. How many of you have got out there and you're fishing, and every time, as soon as you land, now you're hung up again? Well, you're probably casting too far upriver. All right? So let's look at this diagram here. So here we have a boat right here in the middle. We got 3 anglers standing in it, and we see an arrow over there. That's the direction the river's flowing. So when you're out there, wherever you are standing, just imagine, and you don't need to do this because people think you're crazy, but stick your hands out right in front of you. Hand out in front, left hand over here if you're casting over to the right. You want a 90-degree angle there. Just take a look at that. And then what you want to do is you want to be casting slightly above that 90-degree angle. All right? Now, this is big. If you're casting up there further than you should, you're probably going to hang up. And that's where you get frustrated with drift fishing. Or you're not getting into the spot that you really want to get is right here, because this cast, the first cast into the water, that's the setup for what you're going to do, and that's catch fish in another spot. You want to drift it through that area so they take whatever you're offering them. So get it in the right position so you're not snagging up and hanging up. And you definitely don't want to be casting up there, okay? And I get guys that do that sometimes. They cast too far up. Now, there is a little trick. You cast a little too far up, you can very slowly reel, and a lot of times you'll bump over any snags, rock, and it could just simply be 2 rocks that are sitting together that you're snagging into. It may not necessarily be a tree branch or a stump or anything. All right, so again, you want to be casting just up from the position directly in front of you. And guess what? If it's too snaggy, or people in your boat, or you're standing on the bank, it's just not working, move 10 feet, right? Turn your kicker on, drag back 10 feet, get in a different position, try it again. Because you don't want to be fighting your tackle and restringing, okay? Because if your line's not wet, you're not catching fish. All right. When you're drift fishing, doing pretty good. All right, when you're drift fishing or free drifting, this is important. Maintain the correct tension on your line. You don't want a big loop in your line. You don't want things getting slack. You don't want to be casting out, you let it fall, then you took over here, you're talking to this guy, and you're grabbing your coffee and your soda or your chips and not paying attention to your line. You need to have good line discipline, and you need to keep the slack out of your line. But with that said, don't have it so tight and take up the tension so much that you're pulling the weight off the bottom. Because remember, we want our weight to tick across the bottom, okay? And that should be a tick, 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 all right? Or if you're in a gravel bed, it might be a lot more quickly than that, but you want that weight to tick across the bottom. And here's the other thing. Keep your rod pointed at your line as it goes down. Don't cast up, do this, and let your line do this, because then you're setting the hook like this. And do we want to set our hooks like this or like this when we're in the river? Up and down. Okay, we want that hook to get into the top of their mouth. Okay, set up for cheaters and yarn. You need to make a decision. Am I going to go with a fixed weight system or am I going to go with a sliding weight system? If you're doing a fixed weight system, you're going to use a number 10 rolling drop swivel, and you're going to tie that to the end of your line. Okay? That means your weight is not going to move up and down the main line. It's fixed. So if you really like that old school drift fishing, you're probably going to go with this. All right? And these rolling drop swivels are the way to go. You're going to tie on a double or a single cheater hook leader setup. You're going to add your pencil lead, and then you're going to put 3/4 to an inch of yarn. And we'll get into the yarn here in a second. Or you're going to use sliding weight. Now, if you're going to use sliding weight, you're going to have a number 10 snap swivel. You're going to put it on the main line, right? Then you're going to take a 4mm bead. You're going to slide that on. Then you're going to tie on a roller barrel swivel. Why did we put that bead on there? So that's right, protect your knot. You don't want to be banging your knot, right? You're only fishing 10 or 12 pound test line, so that protects your knot. Then we're going to put our leader on. We'll snap our weight however much we need to the snap on the main line, and then put our yarn in, okay? That's your essential setup right there. And when we're done, if you guys want to see a few of those, I'll show them to you. Scent your yarn up frequently. Scent it up, whatever you decide to use. I might use this here. Okay, here's a big one. Yarn. I'm real picky about this. Your yarn should not look like that. It should not extend past the bend of the first hook. If you're using a double hook setup, you don't want your yarn dragging all the way. You don't want that much yarn, all right? You need to keep the yarn short, right? Because it affects the drift in the water, all right? And I've seen that too. I've literally pulled gear out of the water with yarn this long. Now, I don't know if they were fishing it or if it just fell into the water, but you see it. What you really want it to look like is that right there. Okay? That's ideal. Your setup should float through the water naturally. All right? It shouldn't be so much weight that your setup falls down the current. If your current's flowing this way, you don't want it falling down and dragging the weight. You want it just to float naturally. You want the yarn just to have that undulation in the water. Even after you scent it up and you put that yarn in the water, it still has some undulation to it. And it looks good, and it works. And again, and I've said this 3 times already, so it must be important, just enough weight to tick across the bottom. Weight is so important that when I cut my lead, my pencil lead, I start at 1 inch and I go 1/4 inch increments all the way up to 2.5. And it can be the difference between 1 1/4 to 1. That's how important weight is. And if I'm in the boat, if the 3 of us are all fishing together and I fish a 1 1/4, we all fish a 1 1/4. Because that way we all drift exactly the same. And we're not having a mini little reader pit throwdown mess in the boat, right? Okay, you know what I'm talking about. I know you guys have been up there looking around this summer. All right, Dick Knight lure, near and dear to my heart. There's several methods you guys could use for the Dick Knight. You can troll it, you can cast and retrieve it, you can plunk it, and you can drift fish it. There's probably a few more methods out there that you can do. And actually trolling this, if a lot of you guys really want to focus on fishing that lower river, you can actually troll the Dick Knight with fairly good success in the lower river. Fairly good success. You know, get you a dropper on there, figure out what your bottom is, maybe put you a 5 or a 3 or 4 or 6 foot dropper on there with some lead, and get you a 6 or 7 foot leader back there so it just floats in the water as you just barely move through the river. And that can be very effective on the lower river.
Back crossing or forward?
Say that?
Back crossing down it?
No, I would just probably what I would do is I get in there and I just move side to side with the river. Yeah, I'm basically just covering one side of the river to the next, because that lower Snohomish, if you're looking at it from up and above, you haven't been on it, you don't know where the slots are, you don't know where the fish are moving, you ought to cover from one side of the river to the other, because it really looks featureless, doesn't it? Yep. Okay, so what should the Dick Knight look like? It should have a wobbling action as it moves through the river, through the water. If we took a Dick Knight and we blew it up, what is it? A flasher or a dodger? Huh? Does it rotate or does it do this? That's right. So that's what you want. You want that lure to do this in the river. I've been working on trying to get some video footage of this Dick Knight with the right action, and it's difficult in the water. I'm working on it. As soon as I get it, it'll be on the website. But you want it to just have this motion right here. Now, if you cast into some dead water to try and come into the little faster moving water, and you know that thing's just going and drop into the bottom, then you need to retrieve it some and create that action, okay? But it doesn't take a lot of reeling to create that. So if you have little or no current, you're gonna reel a little bit faster to achieve the action of that lure. If you've got more current, I mean, if there's current there, you've got decent current, you can see seams and edges, you probably don't need to reel at all. You just need to have correct line tension. That's it, okay? Okay guys, that's the end of part 2. Make sure you move on to part 3 for more information on fishing coho in the Snohomish River in Western Washington.